Okay, so I have a few things for this show. I go over the US citizen who provided her birth certificate that apparently wasn't good enough for ICE, and they've kept her detained and moved her around. I'm going to go over how Hawaii is being used as um, a detention site to just abandon people. I'm going to go over the 200 denaturalizations that they want to do per month. Hi, so I'm going to go over a little bit about the history of denaturalization, just a bit, just so that we can kind of understand what it means when I say that he wants to deport 200 a month. In 1906, the act allowed for the process to begin, so usually used for cases of fraud, racial ineligibility, lack of good moral character. 1907 expanded the law to include expatriation, and so U.S.-born citizens and women who married foreigners. 1940 Nationality Act, national security risks included native-born, so someone who evaded the draft or fought in foreign wars. 1952 McCarran-Walter Act to keep out Soviet communist spies, and retained a quota system for nationalities. 1907 to 1973, there were 22,000 instances of denaturalization, including, so 1923 made Indian descent ineligible, stripped citizenship for no reason. And then they kept adding groups. So 1933, it was Germany, German citizens, 8 million people were expelled. And the government kept adding groups. So 1967, when SCOTUS said it should not be so easy to cancel naturalization, it slowed down. So since 1968, less than 150 people have been denaturalized, primarily over fraud during process, voiding rights. The ideological and racial deportations are stigmatized now. So 2019, they started using Atlas, which uses the Amazon cloud, and it analyzed 16.5 million people and found that 124,000 should be flagged and looked into. Operation Janus was during the Obama years, analyzed and found that 1,600 people should go. And then Operation Second Look under Trump, they found that 700,000 people should go. You can see kind of how he's planning to use this to go back to the 1906, where really it was just a catch-all, people you didn't like. This article says it's imposing arbitrary numerical targets on denaturalization cases risks politicizing citizenship revocation, said Sarah Pierce. Citizenship is a right you've earned, and it should just be really difficult, because it's so hard to get, should be really difficult to take. Requiring monthly quotas that are 10 times higher than the total annual number of denaturalizations in recent years turns a serious and rare tool into a blunt instrument and fuels unnecessary fear and uncertainty for the millions of naturalized Americans. And I know some. I'm sure you do too. This is just the start of a very slippery slope that we've seen coming from the Trump administration, pushing in every arena. It starts with denaturalizing immigrant citizens, and it ends with denaturalizing US citizens. And that is something that has also happened in history and does happen around the world. So like at one point they said, if you fought in a foreign war, I mean, if they're saying if you live elsewhere, that you are no longer, there's no dual citizenship. You know, it is a very slippery slope. So we must push back with all the strength we have, call out their abuses whenever we can, sound the alarm, and protect our neighbors every chance we get. Absolutely true. So this case about Dulce Consuelo Diaz Morales, who was taken on December 14th, so exactly 1 week ago, a Maryland woman who has spent days in immigration detention despite being a U.S. citizen with a valid birth certificate. Dulce Consuelo Diaz Morales, 22, was born in Maryland and spent time in Mexico before coming back to the United States. So the sister was there with Dulce and her dad. So I kept shouting at them as she was from here. but they wouldn't listen to me, the younger sister said. So Shirley Alvarita Diaz Morales' 17-year-old sister told this writer Thursday night that she, her sister, and their father were doing laundry in Baltimore on Sunday. Diaz Morales was sent to a holding room at Baltimore's ICE office. Attorneys worked to file a petition for writ of habeas corpus. And at some point, she was transferred to Louisiana. It was a troubling move, given both the ongoing legal effort to keep her in Maryland and the state's reputation as a deportation hub. So that's not good. They have a history of that, too. We spent, I think, close to 5 hours waiting in Baltimore to speak to her before we were told they had moved her out of state in the middle of the night. So we suspect they did this because they knew we were going to file the lawsuit. Of course they did. According to the court docket in the habeas corpus case, the court transmitted information about Diaz Morales to the Trump administration. And in that order, it prohibits the government from removing a person from the continental United States and suspends the effects of any change of the petitioner's legal status. So they can't say that she's illegal. And that may deprive the court of subject matter jurisdiction over the petition. Respondents, including all that are acting for them or on their behalf, are enjoined from removing petitioner Dulce Consuelo Diaz Morales from the United States or altering her legal status during the pendency of this action, subject to further court order. She's being held at Richwood Correction Facility. So the detainer locator also lists her country of birth as Mexico. They're denying that any of her birth certificates, which are from Laurel, Maryland, her records of immunization records, medical records, they're denying the authenticity of them. That's her lawyer saying that. I mean, that's crazy. After being born in Maryland, she went to Mexico as a child, but never obtained a U.S. passport. At some point, she entered the United States without documentation. So they're saying that because she came here as a child, she should be expelled, which is already wrong. But they're not accepting a state birth certificate. Is that happening elsewhere? That is scary. Re-entering the country without documentation does not affect whether someone is a U.S. citizen. That's her attorney saying that. Records that are indisputable: birth certificate, immunization records from the state of Maryland, and various affidavits. The attorney says, I called the hospital, and they were able to confirm that she was a patient during the general period. Okay, this is another one. So ICE has been sending immigrants from the continental U.S., so the states, to Hawaii, to an island, and no one knows why. So 23-year-old has bounced from Florida to Louisiana to California and back before being transferred to Honolulu. Another man was released on bond in Honolulu in an unfamiliar place with no one to help him return to California. I mean, why? They were held at the Honolulu Federal Detention Center after being transferred from the continental United States by ICE. So they've been doing this since summer. Concerned that people may be falling through the cracks without adequate legal representation. Well, of course, because they're being sent away from their homes, their family. The hard part is there's no public access to information about how many detainees are at FDC and at any given moment, let alone how many of those are being transferred from the continent. So they're not keeping records. They're moving people all around the country. They're moving people before they can get legal help and before their family can contact them and talk to them about what happened, so that they can then report it to the news so that people can know what's going on. I mean, the whole thing is super, super shady, illegal, and just morally grotesque. A 23-year-old client, he was bounced between Florida, Louisiana, California, and Hawaii, all within a month. His mother had a hard time reaching him, and he lost his legal representation when he was transferred to the Honolulu FDC. Separation from resources and support, Hawaii's geographic isolation, and lack of Spanish-speaking attorneys are some of Stacey's main concerns about the transfers. It's just, if you've ever been to Hawaii, there's just less of everything because you're on an island. In July, ICE detained him and brought him to San Francisco. 3 days later, he was transferred. 3 days he was transferred to Hawaii. He's been there for 3 months. The only thing that made sense to him, he added, is that a transfer has a tactic to tire him out. Oh yeah, well, okay, so that's the other report. There's been a lot of cases of people just waiting so long, mistreated, not fed, don't have water, no place to lay down, even to sleep. They are kept sitting up. I mean, this is inhumane, crimes against humanity, and just there should be some recourse. What happens? Yep, not enough attorneys. In the past, the Honolulu Federal Detention Center has been considered underused, barely filling a quarter of its capacity to hold those who are charged with federal crimes. However, this year it's become one of 8 facilities, so there are 8 around the country, managed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons that accepts those detained by ICE. So they're building detention centers and they're using existing prisons. So they are housing migrants and prison murderers together. That's gross too. Between 40 and 80 immigrants are currently being detained in the Honolulu Federal Detention Center. For the way a person is transferred, the harder it is for them to have access to an attorney. Of course, that is the point. So the congresswoman there in Hawaii and in Honolulu, Jill Takuda, said she is planning her 3rd visit to the facility, where she will check on the status of whether the facility has started separating those detained by ICE from the general population. So it's just awful that they are mistreating them. They're risking their lives. I mean, there was a guy who was hogtied and hung, and then they said that he killed himself. Like, how does that happen? And that is happening in these facilities. So they're not safe. Okay, so then there's this one that just, as a mother, I can't fathom. A shocking new analysis reveals that at least 3,800 children, including 20 infants, have been swept into ICE custody since President Trump's revived the family detention program. The Marshall Project of Immigration and Customs Enforcement data has revealed that the 20-day limit has been exceeded. Over 1,300 of these children were held for 20 days or longer, exceeding federal benchmark meant to protect minors. Harsh conditions. Court filings describe children being held without food. Well, I mean, how do you do that? Food or water at airports before being moved to Texas facilities. Strategic pressure. Former officials suggest families are being held as long as legally possible to pressure them into giving up on their cases and then being sent somewhere. So, and some of these people, I'm sure, are asylees, and they are here because they are afraid to go home. So if they go, something is up. Facilities reopen. The Trump administration has reopened the Dilley facility in Texas, reversing the previous administration's policy of closing family detention sites. So yeah, Biden closed a bunch and tried to reunite families, and now he's doing it all over again. But this is Miller. This is Stephen Miller.
I just experienced the greatest victory in my entire career as a lawyer. My client Ahmed, guy from Egypt, an accountant, went to his naturalization oath ceremony and they said, sorry, it's canceled. Ahmed, he didn't like it. So he hired me. We sued USCIS and we asked a federal judge to take over the case, because keep in mind, the law says that USCIS only has 120 days after the completion of an interview to make a final decision on a naturalization application. After we filed the lawsuit, it went to trial. And when we got to trial, the judge asked the U.S. attorney, what's going on with this case? Why is there such a delay? And the U.S. attorney had a long-winded answer. He said, listen, we have serious national security concerns. There's a background check. It's very important that we not naturalize somebody who could be a risk to the United States. This implicates foreign policy, blah, 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 ticking time bomb, terrorism, blah, blah. He went on and on and on for like 15 minutes. Then the judge looked over at me and he said, counselor, is your client ready to take the oath? And I said, I think he is, Your Honor. He said, sir, please stand up and raise your right hand. The judge swore him in on the spot. And then the judge came down from the bench, hugged the client, my client, and took a selfie with my client. That is the type of power that you have that you don't know about. And if your naturalization oath ceremony was canceled, you need to be like Ahmed. You need to assert your rights, get yourself sworn in, and be done with this entire mess. And if what I'm saying speaks to you and resonates with you, let me know in the comments below.